will they still be able to open? And that still wasn't clear. If you look into your crystal ball?
Well, I don't think we can clearly tell what would happen, but we certainly put into play a high-risk equation if we just presume that he'll find another solution without working through this with some due diligence. So again, it'll be all out for the public and for the electeds in terms of decision-making on the 26th, and it should be a fascinating session.
Right, and again, to explain to the residents, basically what he's saying too, by the city agreeing to waive the transient occupancy tax for a period of time and then to be repaid back, that gives them the opportunity to go to a lender and then have received maybe $10 to $12 million or whatever the amount is for their opening.
Right,
So
right. I mean, that's the basic concept, and it may be just a portion of the TOT, not all of the TOT for a period of time. I think I certainly can disclose that I got a call from Donald Trump last week on this, basically indicating that he'd heard about the proposition that Lowe Enterprise had put forward to the city, and indicating that he wanted a similar deal if we struck one with Lowe, or he was going to add this to his lawsuit. He's got a $100 million lawsuit that's going through the court process right now. So not great news from Donald. I did indicate that unlike Terranea, the Trump National has no overnight lodging, so it's a little difficult to be talking about a sharing of bedroom tax with a organization and an asset that doesn't have overnight lodging. But we heard what he had to say.
We have so many other things to talk about in the city. Again, though, with Terranea, anything you want to add, you want residents to know out there just about the decision at hand?
Well, that it's certainly under a great deal of study and investigation by our staff. We have a council that's, I think, very good at rooting out what are the core questions and issues to be resolved. And then finally, at the end of the day, I believe our 5 electeds will do what's in the best interest of our community.
Okay.
So,
you had several other council meetings where lots of big issues were discussed. We can just go right to the budget workshop meeting where you had, let's see what's happening in the economy. You as a council have tough decisions to make to keep the budget balanced and to avoid a deficit. You had programs put before you, including RPV-TV, which needed to be cut back a little bit, but you're trying to do the best you can with what you have.
Right.
One issue that seemed to raise a lot of concern was the corps deputy. The discussion about possibly reducing from 3 to 2 corps deputies. Explain that and just sort of the decisions that were made at the budget workshop.
Yeah, I think since 2003, we've had 3 corps deputies as part of the peninsula-wide law enforcement program. Over time, a great deal of that funding for that came from grants, law enforcement grant funding to the 3 cities. That's been cut back over time, and now, as we understand it, although I haven't had the opportunity yet to talk with some of my fellow electeds on the peninsula, my fellow mayors about this, but our staff has picked up from their respective staffs that they're in favor of cutting back 1 deputy as a cost-saving mechanism, again, because the grant funding for this has diminished, and it's tough times. If the budget was approved as currently constructed, we'd have a $175,000 deficit on a $19 million budget, which isn't a large deficit, but we have balanced the budget for several years in a row, unlike the state, unlike many cities. We also have a fairly healthy reserve. Part of the decision process still before the council to adopt a final budget is, are there areas that make sense to reduce back or cut back some more? Because we don't know what's out there. Quite frankly, if I look in a crystal ball at what's out there, I have unfortunately a pessimistic feeling that the state ballot initiatives are going to get a majority of California voters to support them. The polling doesn't look good. There's still a week and a half before the election date. I believe it's on Tuesday the 19th.
Yes.
And so it may turn around, but if it doesn't, then all balls are back up in the air in Sacramento. The governor has some time ago declared an economic emergency in the state. That, allows the ability for him to propose to the state legislature to take some of the funds generated by property tax and car license tax from the cities back to the state. And that could put us in a real swirl. So I think we have to be very mindful of what could be happening over this month, month and a half. We don't know where the end is in sight with respect to the national challenge in terms of the economics. So we have to, in my opinion, be very conservative in what we do this year with our budget. The good news, though, is we do have a very substantial reserve, and we run our city on a fairly shoestring budget as it is now with a great deal of governance. So amongst all the 480 cities in California, we're in one of the better positions, but we can't relax.
Well, you've had no time to relax because you've had meeting after meeting after meeting. The Tuesday council meeting, you got to, we're going to switch gears from budget talks and Terranea to peacocks, to ruffle your feathers, Larry. No. What is happening with the peacock situation in the city and the direction you've given staff as far as drafting an ordinance regarding peacocks?
I actually missed that meeting. I was at California Coastal
right.
Commission in San Francisco. But what I sense is going on is that more and more of our residents in various parts of the community are concerned about the overpopulation of peatfowl. As a consequence, some have come forward to us with some support by a council member or two to see about intervention by the city. I will tell you my position on this. My position is we should not get into the business, the city, of trying to manage and collect peatfowl. Quite frankly, I don't think we have the budget to do that. That would be a new cost to the city. I think it's better handled by the local HOAs and neighborhoods with education, information, and that kind of support from the city. But I'm really not in favor of our city undertaking trying to deal with peatfowl. Now, the one thing, though, that I do support, and it did come out of the Tuesday meeting, was direction to staff to go back and develop an ordinance that would prohibit feeding of peatfowl in the city. Because one of the big issues is that we have some residents who like peacocks, peatfowl, and some who don't. The ones that like it, some of them are actually increasing the number by and concentration by feeding them. And we need to outlaw that.
Right, there's just, there's a lot of letters to the editor I've seen that said, I love peacock, I love peafowl, they're beautiful, but at this point now I have 50 in my front yard versus the 5 that I've enjoyed. And there's the peacock-friendly gardens and the ones that aren't, so, but it's certainly the symbol of the peninsula, and so.
Well, I don't think we'll ever see a complete vanishing of peatfowl or peacocks on the peninsula, but the fact of the matter is the governance of dealing with where there are heavy concentrations needs to start with the ordinance that outlaws feeding, and then it needs to be oversight and action taken by neighborhoods and HOAs. That's where I'm at.
Okay. One last issue that has been going on that sparked a little controversy is this windmill off PV Drive East. One resident has a windmill up, and I believe that was put up without a permit, correct?
Right.
And so that's an issue. And then also looking at directing the staff to come up with a windmill policy. Explain what's going on with all that.
Well, this is our first incursion into another area of purported energy savings. We have had and do have a robust program for alternative energy sourcing in terms of solar panels on homes. We have not, to this point, allowed a wind turbine alternative in our residential areas. I frankly, personally, will have to be convinced that it makes sense. There are a number of issues associated with it in residential communities from an aesthetic standpoint, from a safety standpoint, et cetera. So until I see more on this, I'm not a big proponent of seeing wind turbines in our city, in our residential zones. Commercial zones, yes. Maybe institutional zones, maybe, but not in our residential zones.